dinner plans tonight? A meal inspired by baby Brian. Boiled vegetables. Kindergarten.
Well, that was probably the most unnerving way to start the show, but welcome to Crappy Reviews. I'm Chris, and with me as usual is my changeling co-host, Rob.
Baby back ribs.
Ugh.
That's right, everybody. Cal let us out of our cages just long enough to talk about the Changeling Season 1, Episode 5, This Woman's Work. But before we get started, do us a huge favor, give this video a like to let the algorithm, the ultimate wise one, know that you're enjoying our content.
All right, Rob, we watched it. We talked about it. Rate it.
7. Give it a 7. I like the little bit of horror elements we got in this episode. I've been really looking forward to that more from the show. But seemed a little bit like a filler episode, like I think you've kind of mentioned to me.
I agree. I'm going to give it 7.5, and the 0.5 comes from Kindergarten. That last 30 seconds was awesome. So I think it was a little bit of story building in the middle, but the last 30 seconds with Kindergarten and that super deep bass voice was a whole 0.5 to itself.
Yeah, the super deep bass and audio mixing got me real good, especially with Baby Brian. No child, especially that size, should be making noises like that. So that one put a little shiver down my spine, but I don't know if that affected me as much as the change to not William.
So, not William. So we're talking Kindergarten.
Not William.
We're
Yes,
gonna
Kindergarten.
We'll refer to him
Kidgarten.
as Kindergarten. Yeah,
Kidgarten,
or
as we established on the last
yeah.
episode.
We know that William is no longer really William. Kindergarten tells us that he removed William's face.
And when I found my people, I took off William Wheeler's face.
To me, I think that he was William that whole time, and there was some glamour magic happening, and by removing the face, he means he's showing his true self behind the magic. There's no actual shedding of faces or anything like that.
An actual mask, yeah.
Yeah,
It's not,
there's
not
none
a
of that
Leatherface
was going on.
situation here.
Do you agree?
Yeah, I 100% agree, because I think he also mentions, I shed the name. It's not my name when I met other people like me.
Right.
So yeah, I definitely think it's
Other
the magic
people
piece there.
like me.
People's a strong word, because I think he is a grown changeling who now realizes he's a changeling. Whatever the non-human entity is that a changeling is, he's one of them. He knows others exist now. So the fake name of William Wheeler, the fake face of William Wheeler, he just went full tunnel snakes, dropped his voice about 8 octaves, picked up a British accent all of a sudden, and now this is who Kindergarten is.
I agree with you 100%. I think we're looking at an adult changeling, and I think the adult changeling revealed itself when William, as William, and in his own head as William, walked by the art gallery and saw the photo of Emma, and he kind of looked captivated for a second, like the photographer and the art dealer also did. But he looked captivated for a second. He was holding Agnes, or who I would think is Agnes. I mean, it would make the most sense if that was Agnes. And as you had mentioned earlier when we were talking about this, that was the moment William left or kind of started going away, and Kindergarten started coming.
Yeah, I'd say that the
out.
window cracked almost, right?
Yeah.
Like it just made the opening. And now let me kind of transition there a little bit and say I agree. I think that was Agnes, because this is clearly back in time a little bit, because it's before Apollo and Emma. We know that in our current timeline, Agnes is no longer with us, but he used that against his wife. Chris, kind of run us through again. I know he gave us some details, and Greta gave us some details towards the end of this episode about what happened with To Kill a Mockingbird.
So last episode, To Kill a Mockingbird was a big thing. It's been a big thing the whole time, but last episode, in episode 4, we got a lot more screen time with To Kill a Mockingbird, and we know that the story itself, not just in this context of the show, but just in literature in general, is the death of innocence. So apparently, he's trying to drive his wife back to him. So he's depleted all her money, and is kind of forcing her out, back into the open because she can't go anywhere. So I think that was part of it. And then the writing of the
Mhm.
name in every page of the book was him telling her that she killed innocents, because in his story, Greta killed Agnes. But after seeing everything we saw in episode 5 and all the conflicting stories, it's kind of confusing. And I think you kind of knocked it out on how you think things went. So why don't you go ahead and tell us your thoughts on that? Because I think they're correct.
Yeah, so I think there's a world that exists, if you will, where both Greta and William, well, not William, but kindergarten, both of them are correct in what they're saying, that the other one killed Agnes, because as we've seen, Greta, I believe, did kill the child, the young entity, whatever it was. And that is what William is blaming her for. But Greta knows that Agnes was switched and was a changeling, but William, kindergarten, however you want to phrase it, still viewed her as their child. So Greta's blaming him for the switch, if you will. So that was no longer their child, it was the death of their child. And he's blaming her for the actual killing because she did kill Agnes, whether that was actually the child or a changeling. So they're both kind of right in a way, but
From their
it's
perspective,
correct.
they're right.
Yeah.
And it's funny that word I'm using because Greta says that, like, oh, I came all the way here to tell me his perspective, right?
Hmm.
And it seems like an issue of perspective. And to your point, I guess just to sum it up, William sees the killing of the changeling as the killing of innocence in his child, and Greta sees the loss of her human child Agnes as
As
William
the switching
killing,
of the changeling.
right, as William killing her. So again, it seems like from their each perspective, a child was lost, and now that we know William's true form and identity, it makes a little more sense.
Yeah. So that being said, we also learn that Greta and Emma are not the only ones who have done this. Uh, all
Which,
of these
by the
women on the
way,
island.
oh, go
Yes.
ahead. I'm sorry. No, go
No, no,
ahead.
no. Go ahead.
No, you're gonna lead right into it. Go ahead.
Oh yeah. So all of the women on North Sister Island, maybe, have done this same this same action, and that was how they've all ended up here, right? They've all kind of, through one way or another, ended up at this point, and have congregated on this island that Cal is running and keeping them safe on.
First of all, I'm gonna go back to that little silly joke you just made, and we hadn't talked about it, but I don't think it should go unsaid that because we're living in this mirror universe in this show, it isn't all that unlikely that they chose North Brother Island to be an island full of women, because it's like an opposite world kind of effect. And I wouldn't be super shocked if that was on purpose, where it was North Brother Island until we changed it. That's what she said. So
Hmm.
it does actually kind of track the joke you just made.
Especially with the storyline, the kind of overarching with the narration and everything that we've
Right.
even talked about. That they're trying to snuff out our power, and those not raised by the woman will be raised by the world. That there's that overarching sense of female strength, and not wanting to have men snuff it out. So that actually is kind of a good parallel. I was just making a
You
silly
were,
little
and as
joke,
you, and as you
and
said it, I'm like, you
yeah,
know
and
what?
it
That
kind
kind of
of
ties together pretty well with
some good symbolism there.
the whole episode 5 symbolism, because we hear it from the narrator in the very beginning. We hear it from Cal. She even says, "Oh, you give him some breakfast, and he's gonna tell you what to do." Like, it kind of rolls through the whole episode. So I wouldn't be super shocked if that was on purpose. And it also, what I was going to say was to strengthen the argument that we had about the different perspectives and who killed which Greta. We know that Greta did kill the changeling because she's on the island, and Cal makes a point to tell us and to answer Apollo's question in the episode that
Hmm.
yes, all the women here have done what we've all done it, including Cal herself, because
Right.
uh, KG
Kindergarten.
kindergarten
Yeah.
tells her, like, you have one kid, Uno, and
Hmm.
so we know that she was part of it as well. So that, I think, kind of strengthens the argument or the theory that they both see this differently. Now, what uh, kindergarten's idea of bringing his family back together. I think that was part of the 70,000 to draw her out because you're out of money, you can't really do much. Credit cards will pop up. He's a tech guy, so he could probably see all the credit card stuff. I think that was probably to draw her out in the open because he wants to see her. I don't know what exactly he means by getting my family back together because I think he means that. I just don't think he means it in the same way we all mean it. I think he sees it differently.
Well, Greta did make a statement that roughly, I, I might be paraphrasing here, but it was something along the lines of he believes that we belong to him. That it was almost like she was saying it was less about a family and more just we're his. That's what he thinks.
Yeah.
That was kind of what she said. He keeps finding his way back into my life. We're his. That's what he thinks. So it's almost more of it's what he had and like a possession more than his actual desire to, have a happy family
Right.
as much as just what he was looking at.
And again, that goes into the same overarching theme of women kind of being seen as
Yes.
property in the show, and this whole episode it kind of ties back in that he owns them, and as a man, they're his property, and that kind of falls back all the way through history, and especially during the times where witches were just being exterminated. And I guess in this
Hmm.
universe, real witches, because in our universe, it's debatable. I'm sure some people believe that, but the overarching theory would be that these were just women that were wrongly accused of being witches. But in this
Right.
universe, these women most likely were witches and were being exterminated by men.
Hmm.
And that's what kind of caused this pull away, to Cal's point, where they left our world to go on their own thing.
One of the other things here is they show all of the children that are on the island there, and Cal makes a point to tell Apollo that yes, they're also raising all these other children. That any of these women who've done this and ended up on the island, they brought the other children with them, and that's why they have the schoolhouse and the books. And we get a good I think we get a really cool scene that's kind of a really good character piece for Apollo, where we see him getting to kind of be a father figure, even for a very short time for these children, which I think for his character is really cool because it's something he clearly wants so badly. um, but all that being said, Apollo did find them. Cal makes a point to say, you know, it took something special for a man to find them, and it clearly was not KG who did it, because he had been looking for a long time, according to even his own story to Apollo. Chris, I know I mentioned this, and we both kind of talked about it. Cal made a very specific statement that only a god could find us here, which I personally don't think he is. This is not to jump ahead. I don't think he's the personal embodiment of the god Apollo. But for her to say only a god could find us here, and his personal mantra being "I am the god Apollo," that's a little on the nose, I think. So I think that. What do you have any thoughts on that possible
So
connection?
I agree with you that I don't think he's an embodiment of the god Apollo. I think the mantra that he uses kind of also leans back into patriarchal society and how he, without asking her, cut the ribbon or the string and all that. So I think the Apollo thing kind of leans more towards that part of it. What I do think is interesting is I don't think that Apollo is all human. And I think William or KG knew that for a few reasons. And I think reason one is he brought him on the boat to go look for this island that he knows exists somewhere. He just can't pinpoint it. For whatever reason, he thought Apollo could show him. He didn't just bring him out there for the hell of it.
Mm-hmm.
He had a reason to bring him out there. And I don't think William knew or KG knew that he still had the twine in his pocket. I think he thought on his own he could somehow discover the hidden island, the glamored island. The fact that he used the twine, I think, to find it is still accurate from our last episode. I think him putting it on kind of
Yeah.
matched
Yeah.
magics from what was hiding it
Hmm.
to what he wore, and therefore he was able to see it. And I think William or KG kind of just assumed that Apollo did that on his own. With that said, William also calls him brother on the way out, and I'm still trying to find out what he said in Norwegian, and I've been trying to translate it for a while, but it's kind of difficult.
Yeah. It's
So
hard to it's hard to search for something when you only got it phonetically.
yeah, it's hard. I've used a few different things, so stay tuned because eventually I will find it. I had my father-in-law, who has a fluent Norwegian-speaking friend, listen to the clip that I enhanced to have it found out. So I will find
This
out what this is.
this is the kind of research you get from crappy reviews. You find native Norwegian speakers to translate
Yeah,
Apple TV shows.
I'm definitely gonna find out what it is because I think it's pretty important. The last phrase he repeats 3 times, but he does call
I,
him
I wrote it out phonetically in my notes and I couldn't figure it out, man.
he does call him brother, and that makes me think that he could possibly have also been a changeling. And in the earlier episodes, when we saw his mother barge in and try to stop him from being taken into the mist, that maybe she didn't actually do that, and that possibly the baptism that she's been pushing so hard for baby Brian, which she was pushing even after Brian was a changeling in the show, when we kind of discovered that he was
Hmm.
biting Emma, and he was sitting up in the seat, that the baptism might have cleaned or at least repressed what was going on with Apollo, and that's why William kind of knew him and they had this vibe together. So that, in my opinion, is what's happening. That I don't think Apollo really is all human. I think that maybe his mom's just making the best of the bad situation. Now, what's in that red suitcase now? After saying that, I don't really know, but I'm sure we'll find
I
out
mean,
soon.
I still I'll just really quick throw out that I've kind of said I agree with everything you said, but I think there's a possibility she did save him, and that's where I think we slightly differ. I think she might have saved him, or I shouldn't say I think she might have. I think in my thoughts she did save him, and then the changeling is what was in the suitcase. Um, and because remember she looked a little beat up when she was walking out on the dock, that it could have been some kind of struggle.
True.
She got it in the suitcase. It got sent down there, and through whatever connection KG, William Wheeler, thinks he was a changeling because he was supposed to be. And I think that's where that brother part comes in. He thinks they are, and that's also why Apollo hadn't been affected the way KG was with everything. And
One of us is right because he either
yeah,
was
yeah,
or
one
was
of us will
not.
be right. Exactly. Yes, there are
That
two
scene
options.
happened, so either he is or he is not, and one of us will be right.
So whether Apollo is or not, we now know KG William is non-human. They were both trapped in these cells that we also find out in this episode. It seems like Emma was as well.
Right.
We get a lot about Emma's story in this episode, both previously, before she came back from Brazil, and afterwards, right, with baby Brian, even after everything happened. So so after that, we also meet our mysterious Norwegian photographer, who is remind me of his name again, Chris.
Oh, Leif Knudson.
Yes, oh yes, Leif Knudson, Mr. As translated, heir to the son of Nud.
Yes, Leif means
Leif.
heir, and Knudsen is Nud's son. Just a break there between the name, which then translates to the knot, KNOT, which is interesting because we've watched a very special knot be tied multiple times, as well
So
as them being married, which is tying the knot. So there's been multiple symbolic and actual knots tied in the show, and the heir to the knot is Leif Knudsen, which coincidentally, Easter egg, which maybe people saw, maybe you didn't. I didn't see it till a few watchings in. The art gallery
mhm.
that he's looking at Leaf's photos on the computer is on the outside of it's backwards. It says Knudsen,
Yeah.
which is kind of confusing that the gallery has the same name as the photographer, but the person in the gallery is looking at the photographer's website to order or transfer a photo over to his own gallery. That could be the case, but it seems odd. You would think the gallery would be called something different than the photographer's last name that he's having the photo brought over, because the art curator seemed surprised when he saw it, not like I'm just doing paperwork to get the photo that the owner of the gallery once brought in. He discovered said photo, and it
Yeah,
was like
yeah.
a
I
big
think
deal.
that's a good way to put it. It was a surprising find, more than him just doing his job at that point. So our photographer Leif Knudsen, knock off Chris Pratt as I had him in my notes. We we see that he, we'd heard about the mysterious photo. But we see that he set up the tripod, left the camera, kind of left her to her own devices
He
there.
had to make pee.
Yes, he had to make pee. He set up the tripod and left her to her own devices here. And I'll say, I think early on when Michelle told us about the photo, there was a lot of, especially on my side, it felt like there was something behind the photographer. She said this Norwegian photographer. So we immediately jumped to, oh, he's Norwegian. There's some kind of tie in here, right? I didn't get the impression from either scene, any of the scenes he was in, that there was some kind of existing motivation. He seemed like he set up the tripod, he was going to do his work, take some photos. She took it upon herself to do this. And then when he was exposing the film, he was exposed to a lot more and looked real surprised.
I agree with
So
you.
I'm kind of under the impression now, yeah, that something you said is what I think is probably the most accurate. Is we have the two Knudsen's who see the nude photo.
I see what
Oh,
you
that
did
was
there.
funny. That was funnier in my head, but okay, at least it
I
works.
see what you did there.
Um,
Okay.
and are to the same way that William Kindergarten may have had something trigger. I think you kind of touched on as a fact that maybe that connection was where it lied there as well.
Yeah, I think for William, when he was William to himself, when that personality was in control, when the changeling was repressed, I think that unlocked that kind of flipped the switch to let KG out of the cage and push William back in. And then I think for the art director, which we don't know his name, but he obviously is entranced by the photo as well. And Leif Knudson, when he's developing the photo, this could be just that he had a fan in the room, but if you can see the photos to his right, as soon as Emma's face starts to come in, the photos kind of blow behind him, almost like something was released into the room. And that would kind of track
Something
with
magical was happening.
right, that the look itself was enchanted. And I don't know if Emma knew this when she did it. And when I say that, so basically what I mean is I don't know if she took the photo as Emma or if she was under the influence of some sort of magic like we saw in episode 4 when Cal made the doll's face move with the twine on, if she was kind of being used almost like a voodoo doll and took it, or if she did it on her own. And the reason the photo has power is because she already had the bracelet on. I'm sorry, the twine on her wrist at the time of the photo, and it just kind of transferred through. The changelings that are out there recognize the magic that they most likely don't like within the photo itself.
Hey everybody, future Chris and Rob here. We felt remiss that we left out a piece of the puzzle that we thought was a good example of what's happening with the photo of Emma and what the people are doing when they see it.
Ghostbusters 2. Vigo from Ghostbusters 2 is where my mind went when I saw the scene of the curator and Leif Knudson and at the time William Wheeler looking at Emma's photo. The eyes, the whole thing. It was reminiscent of Ghostbusters 2 with Vigo. The effect that it had on everyone in the movie. The curator in that movie and the Ghostbusters in the movie, they were all entranced and under the power of Vigo. That I think is essentially what's happening here in a less comedic sense, obviously, but the ability to connect with people through the painting. The magic is in the painting. How the magic's there is up for debate, like we talked about in the show. But I think that's probably a good example of what our theory is kind of getting a roundabout idea at.
Plus, Vigo wanted the baby.
He
So
did want the baby.
there is that. So basically, keep out an eye for some pink ooze or purple ooze. But now we'll get back to our regularly scheduled programming. I'm glad you said that because I actually had a very specific thought that I don't think it was her in that moment in the photo because this is kind of a TV show thing more than storyline type thing, but Clark Bacco, the actress playing Emma, in that moment in the scene when the timer's going off and you can tell the photo's about to be taken, the look on her face and just the demeanor she has when she turns her head around to look at the camera, to me seemed super deliberate to make it seem like she was not herself anymore. To that point, almost, and actually just in my head now, kind of going to the point of William saying, I'm not saying she's a changeling, but just to kind of show that she's not herself. He said, I took William's face off.
Right.
It almost seemed like she was putting on a face.
Right.
Again, maybe more so in the
Well, Michelle brings this
glamour,
up when she
in the
describes it,
glamour magic. Yeah, she looked like a
that
sorceress.
she looks like a
And
sorceress, and it could be that because William at that point, uh, maybe I think it is basically if you're aware of the magic, if you're on that side of the fence, you can see what was really being shown in the photo. But if you're just me walking around, not a changeling, at least I don't think so,
debatable.
you would just see a really nice photo and say and move on. But William and possibly the art dealer and possibly Leif Knudson, they see it, and the changeling in them kind of turns on because they're seeing what's really there. He might have been surprised not because of what he saw as like a nude photo, but because what he saw was not what we see. And the reason they use a nude photo in this is to kind of sleight of hand this, where we're just assuming he's surprised because this woman's naked in his photos, but in reality, what he saw is not what we think he saw. And
The
as a
true the
right,
true form.
and as a changeling, that's where I think his Norwegian heritage kicks in. Is that there's a chance that he's part of the lineage of the people that came over, which by the way were called sloopers. This is a real thing in 1825. These people did come over on a boat called Wet Restoration, and it was a treacherous journey and took 98 days. And they did come here and land in America, and they were in Brazil for a little bit, and all this did really happen. So I think he could be part of the lineage that may have had to use less than credible magic to make the journey over the sea. They probably had to,
and
give up a little bit to get there
and get some help from an umibosu.
and get some help from, I'm a bozo. And that's where the changelings are starting to, replace their children with, and that could very well be what's happening with
So
the
so let
Norwegian
me
people in the show.
yeah, let me ask you this question then, because I think, like I said, I have a very strong opinion that I think in that moment we see not Emma having the picture taken. A lot of this episode also shows, I'll say, backstory. Mostly, it feels like to show us how she's changed. Right? We see the wedding day. We see the scene with her on the roof holding baby Brian. Um, the scene where she's sick and Apollo's taking care of her, and they have the whole interchange of him reading the book and her saying he's going to be such a great dad. Um, my only response to that is it feels like this is all to illustrate how much she has changed from before she went to Brazil to once she comes back to once Brian is bored, to just show that progression. Is that am I just taking that at kind of face value, or do you think there's anything else there? I'm not sure how
No,
you feel.
I think they are showing us that she's grown and changed, and it happens throughout the whole show. I mean, we see initial Emma, and that how she's growing into the person that went to Brazil and she wanted to see the world. I mean, she tells us about her growth as a child, and then she saw the world as bigger, and she's continually growing throughout the whole show up until the very end when she seems to be at a tipping point that kind of Cal tells us about, where she's in a place that you can't just get her from the plane, boat, cars or whatever. She's
Planes, trains, and
automobiles, whether she's physically in a realm or she's between realms, or if she's just in an internal struggle between the dark forces that might have been in there after the twine was cut prematurely, and what she really wants is I guess up for debate.
I didn't know my real name either. Didn't know who I really was.
What?
And then I found a place where I belong.
Definitely got confirmation that fake William, kindergarten, whatever you want to call him, is a changeling is not human. So, Chris, what do we think he is?
We both pretty much agree at this point, after talking a little bit about it, that we think he is Fae. Um, there could be other mythical creatures that he could be. In every lore, they're all kind of similar, but we think he's Fae. There's some glamour magic being used that he's, changing his appearance. His hair, his glasses are gone. His clothing is different. The entire thing is top to bottom. It was all fake. So that kind of leans into the idea that the babies that are changelings are glamored, and you can't tell that they're not real babies. So I think that we're looking at
Mm-hmm.
that. We're looking at the fact that the book that we see Apollo read, to the water. What is it?
Mm-hmm.
To
I
the
have it
winds in the
here.
water.
It is To the Waters in the Wild.
To the waters in the wild, which is, by the way, the reason we think Emma was in the cage is because
Correct.
her voiceover with that tablet or that carving of a passage
Mm-hmm.
from the book was in there. We know then that fairies like to eat kids, and that Cal confirms the book is real, that this story's true, earlier in the episode. And since we know that he likes, to eat babies and eat kids, and he says it pretty clearly in his
Yeah, he
posts
he
on.
mentions, yeah, he compares children to food a lot.
Yeah, the strawberries in his car. He compares his daughters to strawberries in the car, and that he has hanging from his rearview mirror. I think in episode 4, when he meets Patrice and Apollo at the docks, and also obviously in his post, and he makes it super clear with his super cool voice about boiling vegetables, which, by the way, is a reference to the Orphan Train, and it was kind of like where the Cabbage Patch Kid idea came from, the Cabbage Patch dolls and the Cabbage Patch Kids, and there's all these photos of babies like growing out of cabbage patches and stuff. That's, I think, kind of where we're going here. That and the fact that Emma dumped boiling hot water all over baby Brian as well, it seems, is kind of part of that. So between the eating of babies that we get in the book that we now know is true, and the glamour magic change, and the fact that uh, KG's face at a certain point in his talk with Apollo in the jail cell, looks pretty identical to baby Brian's face when we kind of get the revelation that he is a changeling. The sunken in eyes and the distorted features. There's a few parts
Yeah.
of that. They're quick, but you can see like this fluid motion on his face where you get the same sunken in eye.
Similar enough that we're taking away that they are from the same family,
Yeah.
if you will.
So I think, and if he is a changeling, which is the theory we've been hinting at or kind of really going at this entire episode, he would be Fae. That's what was left behind.
Mhm.
Just, that's what a changeling is. So being that that's what a changeling is, and the other evidence we just mentioned, that's the theory that me and Rob are going with right now, that William is Fae, and most likely, at least for me, the other Norwegian
Changelings.
members that we've people that we've seen in the show are probably changelings as well, or at least descendants of the initial sloopers that had come over and maybe had to give away a little more than they wanted to get here.
So that's going to do it for our episode this week. But lastly, we want to leave you with our question of the week. Where is Emma?
To answer the question, leave a review on Spotify, drop a comment under this YouTube video, or find us at Twitter at crappy_reviews to let us know your answer. And while you're there, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share to help grow the crappy community. If you've already done so, we really, really appreciate it. We've noticed a little boost in some views lately and some subscriber jumps. And if you're one of those people that subscribed, we can't thank you enough. So thanks for listening to Crappy Reviews with Chris and Rob, and we'll catch you on the flippity flop.